Good afternoon, everyone. We're Team Commercial Equity Consultants. My name is Alyssa Nina. These are my colleagues.
My name is Jack Rizzo.
And I'm Steven Dominique.
We've been brought to you to present a redevelopment plan for 320 West Water Street, and we came up with an idea that we'd like to propose to you. So on our agenda, we have our site plan, market analysis, uses of property, and the profitability. So we'll begin with the retail market and discuss that. In coastal New Jersey, we're in the third phase of recovery. We have decreasing vacancy rates, new construction, which means for us, in our idea, that we have the perfect time to move into the market. So with this, we'll have a good time to move into the market. We'll be in the right position and the right phase of expansion. We'll begin by our first floor retail. So our plan is to have first floor retail and go up for 3 more floors and have that residential. The first floor will consist of a Stu Leonard's, restaurant and bar, shared workspace, and we came up with this through a retail gap analysis. The gap analysis showed that Toms River was using 30% elsewhere. So they were using 30% elsewhere on gas stations, groceries, auto parts, and liquor stores. So with this first floor retail, we're covering 3 out of those 5 options. We have the Stu Leonard's that covers groceries and liquor store because it's both, the restaurant and bar, and the shared office space as well we do have. And then we'll go into the multifamily market, which covers our 2nd, 3rd, 4th floors. We'll be in the phase 3 of expansion, which is kind of risky for us because we are in hyper supply, but there also is enough demand to supply it. There's 1,045 units in excess, and we're gonna fill that. So that would be risky, but the demand is there. So floors 2 through 4 will be 327 units. There'll be amenities, and we're focusing on senior living for this. So we found that there was a lot, through market research, that there was a lot of hospice facilities, but not enough senior living. There was demand for that. So we're filling that demand using senior living. And on this slide, we're gonna have a roof and courtyard. So these amenities will fill the senior living amenities for them. We'll have the garden space that's rentable, hot tubs, pools, and courtyard. And then I'm gonna pass it over to Jack, who's gonna talk about rental rates.
Thank you, Alyssa. So as my colleague Alyssa kind of mentioned, there's a big demand for senior living. You already know in Toms River, there's about a 10% greater median age of Toms River citizens, and that's 10% greater than New Jersey citizens on average. So we already see that we have this older demographic, an older age demographic. That's why we chose to put that age-restricted housing. So 55 and over is where we see the most demand, and like she said, we have the perfect phase of the market where our idea could really fit into the part of the market. So we see one of the most popular ones you would get is that 1 bedroom, 1 bath type of unit, and at 900 square feet, you could expect to get about $1,300 of monthly rent. And that's gonna take up about 25% of the building. The most we've seen in that area, we've seen a lot of 2 bedrooms and 2 baths. Again, you have your family, you know, yourself, and then a guest room. So we see that 2 bedroom and 2 bath unit is going to take up about 1,200 square feet. It's going to take up about 50% of the building, and we can expect about $1,700 in monthly rent. We do then see our 3 bedroom and 2 bath. This is actually more of an up and coming type unit. We haven't seen a lot of these in the past, but now they're starting to become very popular. So for the senior market, we expect to see a 1,600 square foot unit rent at about $2,300 monthly rent. And that's, again, going to take about 25% of the building. So for our potential gross income, I'm going to talk about retail and office in just a little bit. But essentially, what we could see for that residential 1 bedroom apartment, we do see about a potential gross income of about $1.7 million on a yearly basis. For that 2 bedroom apartment, you could expect about $3.26 million in potential gross income. And then for that 3 bedroom, about $3.65 million. So on average, you're seeing about $6.5 million in just residential potential gross income. So again, diversification, that's going to keep a lot of these long-term tenants. We want to make sure we have longevity in that building. So we did decide for that first floor to have a retail and office outlook to create some of that diversification in our revenues. So we do see about 128,000 of rentable space in that first floor. And we expect to, based on comps that we had in the area, we see about $18 of rent, which comes up to a yearly potential gross income of about 2.3. So in total, we are looking at about $8.9 million in just the potential gross income of that building. And the reason I say that building is because we had the opportunity to also use some other properties within the area. Right across the street on a corner lot, we do see 290 West Water Street. This 290 West Water Street address is right now very underutilized. So we decided to make this and fill one of those retail gaps, which I'm actually going to explore a little bit in the next slide. But essentially that 290 West Water Street address, we're going to put a gas station as well as a retail spot. So we decided on an auto zone. They do take up about 6,300 square feet, and that is part of their qualifications that we found out through AutoZone. So this is something that they would be definitely looking into and that we could see them utilizing there. For the gas station part of it, we have about 8 pumps, so 4 actual stations, 2 pumps apiece, so a total of 8 gas station pumps, as well as 2 Tesla charging stations, especially because of that demand of electric cars that we have. So essentially, this is going to provide another diverse source of revenue to our building. So retail gap analysis, that's one of the biggest drivers of a lot of our decisions that we have through this building. Essentially, like Alyssa was saying before, we are losing a lot of revenue to outside of Toms River. So for example, just to clarify, $30 million on a yearly basis is spent on gas stations in total by Toms River citizens. The crazy thing about that is that about only $11 million is spent in Toms River. We're losing about 18.6 elsewhere. So to combat that, that's why we had a gas station. To combat the grocery retail gap, that's why we had a Stu Leonard's. Stu Leonard's fits not only the grocery, but as well alcohol. So we fill around $11 million in retail gap. Now that's appealing for Stu Leonard's. That's appealing for your tenant that's taking about 50% of that bottom floor. That's our goal, to have a tenant that wants to be there and could be there for the long term. So these retail gaps are the reasonings behind a lot of those decisions. And again, that auto zone is going to fill some of that auto parts gap as well. Just keep in mind, about $76,000 is the median household income in Toms River. We see about $17,000 of that being spent on retail on a yearly basis. The amazing thing about that is that totals about $125 million spent in retail, and we're losing about 30% of that. So this could be a very good determining factor to live in Toms River because you have a lot of these amenities right there. Again, senior living, convenience. That's one of the appealing features of senior living and that age-restricted living. So parking is definitely a consideration, especially for this big development. So after setback requirements and the actual building size, we are left with about 52,000 square feet. Now, if you take that, that's about 293 parking spaces. So we have about 327 units. That exceeds the 70% requirement that we need to have of parking spaces. So that allows us to have additional parking spaces for the senior living as well as retail. Given the construction cost, we do have a total construction cost of about $1.17 million just for the parking. And this is a surface parking. So lastly, with our buildings, essentially what we have and what we could bring to the table with this building is about 128,000 of usable square feet for just the retail and office space. That's considering about a 20% common area for that. For the residential, we all do see about a 384,000 rentable space for the blanking out.
Surface level parking?
No, sorry, senior living. Couldn't think of the word. I apologize. But we see about 384,000 just for that. Now in our 290 West Water Street address, that's where we see, like I said, about retail, 6,300. We only assumed a 10% common area. They have a lot of their, especially in AutoZone, they have a lot of their numbers down packed, and they know that they don't really need that extra common area, especially for just an AutoZone. So we have about 6,300 square feet for the AutoZone. Like I said, about 8 gas station pumps and 2 electric charging stations. So it's kind of great just saying, hey, this is where we want to go. These are our outcomes. This is what we could do with this building. I'm going to hand it off to Steven. He's going to kind of give you the rundown of how we're going to get there.
All right, so for total construction costs consist of site acquisition, demo costs, construction costs, the amenities, parking, and then the Tesla charging stations, which totals out to a little under $84 million. As you can see, the 320 West Water Street consists of about 90% of our total construction costs. And then the amenities, so indoor pool, solar panels, and Tesla charging stations, those costs per square feet were all based off of market research and comps. as for the loan, so the project capitalization is about 58 million, 59 million. The down payment is 30% equity. It's going to be around 25 million. The term is 30 years. It's about 4% interest rate. The monthly payment is going to be around $281. So as for PGI, so this is a representation by user source. So for the rent column, these are all based off of, like I said, market research and comps. And then there's going to be a 3% growth year over year for PGI, and the total is going to be around 9.2 million. So as a pro forma, as you can see, it's a little blended, but there's for this type of mixed use property, it's going to be around like a 6% the average. So as you can see, our going in cap rate's about a 6.8, and we have a high debt coverage ratio of about a 1.69. So we assumed 8% vacancies, and as you can see on the third line, the monthly miscellaneous income, that comes from the green room that's on the roof. Seniors are going to pay to rent spots there. That also incorporates laundry sites and vending machines. As for the disposition of property, so the current mixed cap rate for a property of this size is about 5.75%. So as you can see, it's above our going out cap rate's about a 6.5%. So we assumed a higher 6.5% just because of future market speculation and wear and tear over the building over the first 5 years. And as for profitability, we could see that our IRR is about a 14.8% with an 11 million NPV with an 8% pre-tax required rate of return and a 6% after-tax required rate of return. After this, I'm going to hand it off to my associate Jack, and he's going to conclude.
So we kind of gave you a rundown on what our building looks like. It's definitely this big mixed-use building where we have a mix of retail, office, and residential. It's a building that provides a lot of longevity, especially because we did a lot of those retail gap analysis. So essentially, we have tenants that are coming in because they want to be there and that they could last there. And that's the most profitable thing about it. And by having these tenants that are profiting from there, we have a building that's going to profit. Just to ensure that sustainability, we made sure that we had that 290 West Water Street address that's going to provide a little bit extra income through the gas station and AutoZone retail spot through that. And again, we have miscellaneous income powered by the greenhouse room that we have on the rooftop there. We have vending machines, laundry machines, different aspects that provide additional revenue. We also are putting a solar panel. Little things like that are going to add up to these different types of revenue. So like I said, this is the perfect stage of the market to be entering in with this type of building. We have residential expansion. We have the retail gaps that are being met by this building, and this is something that could provide a lot of profit in the long run. With that, I conclude. I open up to any questions you guys might have.
Very nice presentation. I find the 55 and older a little different than some of the other case studies, which is refreshing. How many elevators would you think would be in a building like that?
So it's hard because we would probably separate it. We would definitely have some for the retail, but we have to have some base for that senior living community. We probably would put about 2 or 3 bays just for the senior living part. And then of course maybe one like for a backdoor towards that retail area. The senior living needs to be separated because we definitely understand the fact that seniors are going to be living in a retail area, so a busy area. So that's why we have a separate entrance for them. We have the different elevators. So I would expect about 3 bays. You consider, you'd think maybe 1 per floor, residential floor.
And I'm not that familiar with Stu Leonard's. Is it sort of, I've seen it, but is it sort of like a Trader Joe's?
So I describe it to people as it's like a very vast supermarket. I would say more of like a kind of like a Whole Foods.
Like a fun Whole Foods.
Yeah.
It's like attractions. Yeah.
They call it the Disneyland of grocery stores. Not that it's childish, but it's an experience. People, yeah.
So does, and I'm interested in John's answer as well. Is charging stations in Stu Leonard synonymous with a 55 and older, or is it more of a hipster type use?
Oh.
It has to be able to. People have to shop there, and if it's an expensive and 55 and older, I just was wondering if it goes together.
Fixed income too.
Yeah, so with Stu Leonard's, there's actually one that opened up where my parents live. It's packed all the time, especially because it is new, but you'll see a variety of ages there. They call it the Disneyland of grocery stores, but it's not childish in any way. There are different types of food, ethnic foods, hot foods. There's a restaurant in it. So it definitely appeals to those that are 55 and older. The single family type, the senior living type families, it's not assisted living and it's not hospice or anything like that. It is something that they want convenience, and that's what they would be paying these premiums for. Like Alyssa was mentioning, we do have the different amenities on a per floor basis, but as well we do have, you go right downstairs for some eggs. So it's kind of that convenience that people go into these places for. So.
Question, first of all, as Matt said, well done overall. When you did your demographics on the active adult rentals, did you look at any active adult rentals in the immediate area or even in New Jersey that are as big as 327 units? Because that is a large active adult complex, and so that's my first question.
So yeah, we've done some research on that. There is actually a place nearby that has, it's like a 3-tier system. Their lower tier is senior living. You have to be 55 and older. It's age restricted, but it's not the assisted living type community. There's nothing up by that area that's maybe closer to 300. It's maybe closer to like 150 to 200 units. But this type of property, we expect, because of the redevelopment of the area, we expect the amenities that we're providing, such as Stu Leonard's and the other things with it, we expect that there's going to be a high demand for it. Right now in Toms River, we see a lot of assisted living. We don't see a lot of senior living. So we, like I said, as you see that older demographic, like I said, it's 10% higher than the New Jersey average. We expect there to be a high demand for that.
We don't punish density, John. You know that.
But did you ever consider, because, I'm just looking at, and Steve over here would know better than anyone about the lease-up time it would take for 327 units. Did you ever consider bifurcating it into having a market rate apartment of a couple hundred and an age-restricted apartment complex of 125, so just where you cater to both age brackets and demographics?
Yeah, we didn't think about that, but that's a really good idea.
I will say the one, there's a lot of good things, but one of the good things of the building is we did a lot of conservative analyses. So we have, for example, the gas station, we had lower numbers because we wanted to ensure that if we come to great numbers as it is, it can only go up from there. And it's the same type of thing. You are right. It could definitely not meet exactly that. I do think that with the analysis that we did provide with the phases of the market, I do think it could be filled. You're right. The turnaround time could be a little long to get completely. That's why we also did kind of consider that 8% vacancy rate, which is slightly higher than the average 5 that you would consider. But again, that is one of those things that we're always open to different ideas with different things depending on how it goes. So I think with the redevelopment and everything that appreciates, I think it could work out with the demand.
To John's point, it's always difficult with the amenities to mix active adult and non-active adult. A lot of active adult residents are not looking to be in the pool with kids or having them running around the fitness center. Different look and feel when you're dealing with just seniors versus when you got half and half.
It's true.
Kind of a follow-up question. Actually has to do with the parking, though. If my notes are correct, I think you said you had 293 spaces for 327 units, so you had 70%. That's assuming that I'm assuming you use the RSIS ratio for age-restricted units, right? So I guess my question, and if you're intended these to be more active adults, do you think that parking ratio is going to be sufficient? Because obviously it's going to be very difficult for them to park on the street given the limitations on parking in the area.
Yeah. So just to clarify, the 70% is the requirement we tried to meet, and we have 293 parking spaces for 327 units. 20% of 327 is actually 229. So I was just saying 70% is the requirement. We did actually exceed it. It's more like about 90%. Which does exceed it for that reason of kind of having the allowances for the retail spots. Our thinking on that, and the reason we did it like that, 2 reasons for surface instead of like structured parking, which obviously could fit more. first, the expenses. The construction costs are definitely better for a surface lot than it is a structured lot. So we saw that as a clear differentiator between the two. From there, we did decide that for senior living, you have either a lot of 55-year-olds that maybe are still retiring. I mean, not retiring. That we have less people are retiring at younger ages. So a lot of people are working for a longer time. So that's why we did expect a lot of people to maybe still have those jobs. And if they're in these homes and they're upwards of maybe 70, 80 years old, these types of people may not be driving anymore. They might not have cars, especially with the increase in Ubers and Lyfts and things like that. It's becoming very popular, even for people in these senior living communities. So that's kind of why we came to the conclusions with the the parking lots. There also is a New Jersey Transit deck a couple blocks away. So we kind of use that as justification to allow that. We also don't know. It's one of those things where especially with the redevelopment, since we don't know exactly what's going to happen for the rest of the plan, we don't know what that foot traffic looks like. So right now we did an estimate of, like you said, senior living, just to kind of see what we need. 70% was the rule of thumb. That's 229, and we hit 293. So we do expect it to be to work for our building.
I guess the follow-up question to that is, and this has to do with the gap analysis, which led you to the selection of a service station and the AutoZone, which I guess the essence of the question is, did you go back to the redevelopment plan and sort of check to see if those uses were permitted and whether or not there would be an amendment to the plan that would be needed? Because in the redevelopment plan, it specifically says you can't get a variance. You have to amend the plan. So that would mean convincing the township that a service station on Water Street would be a good idea.
So in the plan, if I forgot the exact verbiage, but in the plan they actually did give us the opportunity. They said you can use surrounding properties for that. So that's why we chose to do that. But besides that, that's all we really knew from the plan perspective of it. Is they did say we could use surrounding properties to kind of expand on it. We didn't want to go too far, too vast. We wanted to keep it as just, like I said, that extra diversification. And back to that gap analysis, that's why we did it right there. And like I said, it is a corner lot, so it's a little bit more convenient.
And I guess the follow-up to that is the proximity to Route 37 where service stations are permitted, which would probably be about maybe a mile away.
Yeah, I think it's a couple miles. Yeah.
Just curious if you processed that when you came up with the idea for the gas station.
Well, we kind of took the idea that gas stations, no one's really traveling more than 3 miles for, and there's really not one for 3 miles. There is some auto stations. There's a popular one nearby, but it's a mechanic shop, so they don't do a lot of the retail part of it. So that's kind of our justification for putting the gas station there. Like I said, there's not that many gas stations nearby, especially because it is a busy exit, and the fact that it is going to be a whole redevelopment. That's why we decided to put that type of thing in that property.
Okay.
So what's the demand for office in that area? I know you have in here the shared office, which we spoke about before, and
Absolutely.
that concept with the WeWorks, is coming into question. So what is the overall demand for office in that area?
Okay, so we came to the conclusion that we wanted to leave that office space open for opportunity. We thought about maybe Ocean Community College, having a partnership with them, or having tech startups, things like that, like kind of like the Google vibe in there, having a Bellworks situation. So we kind of left that open and figured that there is a demand for it because of the popularity of Bellworks and WeWorks nowadays. So we kind of left that open to have like the partnerships between maybe something similar, a smaller scale version of Bellworks and WeWork, and then also having the opportunity with like perhaps Monmouth, Ocean Community College, just to have that open there.
Yeah, we were hoping for something like an incubator, something like that.
I thought your idea of looking at the retail gap was an interesting approach and something that I rarely think about or have seen, so I thought that was great. And I also like that you look at those cycles. They're always scary to me when I look at those circular cycles.
Don't look at those.
Hyper.
Look at it in a mirror.
The thing that I wasn't certain if you'd given thought to was the shape of your building. You showed a 400 foot by 400 foot building, and that is a design that I'm not sure how you would get light into apartments. You have basically 150 feet from the outside wall to the middle of the building. And so I think it's a tough shape. And it was also, you know, the whole, it was very interesting that you had driven the site and you kind of knew what was around. I thought that was great. But I wondered if you'd really given a lot of thought to how everything was going to lay out on the site and actually fit together.
So yeah, the shape is something that we only considered because of the size of the lot and you know, the logistics of including parking as well as the building. And it is a kind of interesting lot like shape and size. That's why we originally chose the square. So what we were originally thinking is because of the unit size, you would have to fit around 100 units depending on the actual size of each one on each floor, an average of about 100 units per floor. We were first considering very kind of like an oblong shape, so almost like thin rectangles, but that kind of fit as almost like a horizontal regular layout. You traditionally walk into a room, it's this big open layout. It would be the same thing, just kind of horizontally, which means you still get some windows. But other than that, we haven't really considered more of the light things, and that shape thing is, the shape is always, you know, you could change it up little by little as long as you keep the same area, but in the square footage of it. But yeah, we didn't really think about the actual light part of it. We did think about energy part of it because especially, you know, different light and things like that, especially because we are going up. We're going 4 floors up, which is actually higher than average in that small area. So that's why we put a solar panel on the roof. I didn't touch on it too much, but essentially that solar panel is going to pay for a lot of the electricity that is powering the heat for the pool up top. And that's one of the things we did kind of want to stay environmentally friendly. So we did research into that, the prices, because that's going to help kind of power a lot of that.
So that one fix there for your square is you really only need 75 or 80 feet of depth on each side to get a double loaded corridor. So that should open up your donut. And then you can do outdoor amenities, a pool and landscape areas, and then people have a view from the inside as well as the outside. But I want to just get back to the parking real quick. So it's 70%, but it's 70% of RSIS, right? Not 70% per unit. So the RSIS number is going to be closer to 2 spaces per unit. So 70% of 600 or 700 parking spaces is going to be, I think, more than you provided. So you have to relook at that.
Right. So parking was definitely something we had to consider, and I think considering the assumption that senior living, we either have people that are still working or people that might not rely on cars anymore. That's why we took a little bit more conservative approach to that. We also did rely on the nearby parking deck and transit area to kind of rely on that part as well. Like I said, it is a little bit conservative of a number. It's one of those things that we have to see how that foot traffic looks like. You are completely accurate. It is one of the more conservative numbers that we did run. We did choose that just because of looking at some other lots. Some other lots are actually smaller, especially downtown areas. You have not that many, you know, parking spaces. Now, of course, convenience is a big question, so that's why we did put 293. But the question always is the assumption of who's still driving in that development. So.
And the thing to keep your eye on there, as Nina will tell you, it's more than just the municipality, right? The lender's going to want to know what your parking looks like. So you can't park, you can't rent, and then the bank owns the building.
What was your thought process on offering 3 bedrooms in an age-restricted apartment building?
So we just had the idea of 55-year-old, you know, you're thinking maybe 18-year-olds. So you have your one room, husband and wife, and then you have maybe 2 kids that are sleeping over for the night, just kind of hanging out. Because I know a lot of families that actually do that now. So just because it is a little more popular, that's why we only did for 25% of the building. That definitely wasn't our bulk of them. But that we had that kind of mindset. It's actually becoming more and more popular in general, let alone the senior type living. So we figured 55 and older, maybe you're 55, you have a husband, wife, one room, and maybe a couple kids staying over a couple nights.
Pretty much out of time. That's good. Excellent job.